Hi, everyone. I'm attorney Donna DiMaggio Berger, and this is Take It to the Board, where we speak condo and HOA. Welcome, everyone, to the inaugural episode of the Take It to the Board podcast. I am delighted to have my dear friend James Donnelly with me today. And as I've said to him personally, turnaround is fair play. So James has graciously hosted me for the last year on his webinar series, the Association Leadership Series, throughout the pandemic. And I told James when this podcast launched, he was going to be my very first guest. So here he is. James Donnelly is the founder and CEO of the Castle Group, a property management company serving communities throughout Florida and Texas. James has over 30 years of experience serving residential communities. He's an accountant and a prominent speaker in the community association industry. James is a passionate community leader and benefactor of numerous philanthropic organizations. He sits on too many boards and councils to mention here, and he's been a good friend of mine for more than a decade. James, I've had the pleasure of watching you receive a number of business and leadership awards and have been so proud to count you both as a personal friend and an outstanding leader in the community association industry. So let's dig in here. I know your background in real estate and property management because we've been friends for so long. But I especially remember very clearly that you made your first $1 million when you were still in your 20s, but the road ahead was not a straight upwards trajectory. So can you tell our listeners that story and how it shaped who you are today?
Yes. Well, first of all, Donna, thank you for having me in the inaugural show. I'm very, very excited about that. And congratulations. I think you were destined to have this podcast. And before I jump into the story, I just want to thank you for all the service you've done to our common industry, the community association industry, and it's been fun. If the last year in a pandemic can be made fun, you helped us make it fun. So thank you for that. So I think a lot of people don't know that I grew up in Bell's Corners, which is just side of the Ottawa, the capital of Canada, in Ontario. And very humbly, we grew up in a 900 square foot, one bathroom, 5 of us home. And I remember we couldn't even afford to have a sod put on our front yards. We were growing potatoes. It was actually, I think, a little embarrassing at the time. But I think I told you this story once, Donna. There was always this one guy, Mr. Miller, on our street who drove this nice car. And I finally said to my father, "What does Mr. Miller do?" And he said, "I don't know. You better go ask him." So I was 12 years old. I literally walked up Quinpool Crescent and knocked on Mr. Miller's door. I said, "Mr. Miller, I'm Jamie at the time, Jamie Donnelly, and I want to know what you do." He goes, "Well, I'm a chartered accountant," which is now CPA. And so I just said, "Thank you." I walked back and announced to my family that I was going to be a CPA. And fast forward, 10, 11, 12 years later, at 25, I was a CPA, and I worked for Arthur Andersen, and they don't exist anymore. But at the time, it was like the pillar of the industry. And a good friend of mine came up, I remember this in December of 87, and said, "You don't look very happy." And I said, all my life I wanted to be an accountant, and I'm an accountant, and I don't like it. But if you can imagine, I'd spent all this time becoming an accountant. So long story short, I quit, and I became a real estate investment salesperson, much to the chagrin, by the way, of both my parents and my new in-laws. Because, CPA, pillar of society kind of position, and I quit to be a salesman. That was not well received. But I did make 10 times my accounting salary in the first year. And we were at the time selling limited partnership real estate, tax advantage. And Canada's tax laws changed in 88. So all of a sudden we had no tax advantages to this product. So we went to Florida. I had a partner at the time, bought an apartment in Largo, Florida, converted it to condo, sold them to Canadians. And I made a lot of money. Quick sidebar in that story, like any young guy who hadn't experienced any failure yet, I had very little humility. I thought everything I touched would turn to gold. I made some really bad investments and lost it all. But in the meantime, I had started a little management company at the request of the Canadian investors in 1992, and to manage these 2,000 apartment units that we'd converted and sold. And so when the Canadian dollar went down in 94, our sales stopped, and I got full-time into property management. So that was how I kind of transitioned from small town Ontario to Florida, from accountant to property manager, from poor to rich to poor, and now, of course, in a wonderful place. So
that is some journey. And I imagine actually that rags to rags to riches story as a parent of 3 boys. I'm sure you've invoked that story when teaching them about life's journey.
Well, I always say, Donna, the two things, people ask me what's my superpower, and I always say curiosity, because I'm just completely curious with everything. And then the other thing is humility. And it's something I didn't have in my 20s, but failure is a wonderful teacher of humility. And I think that's a lesson all our young folks could take. And I know I've shared with my kids.
So what are your keys to success?
Well, I think number one is never ending improvement. So I personally, professionally, company-wise, there's no end. We have something that we call the success cycle that we can talk about later in the program. But basically just deciding where you want to go, coming up with a plan, and continuing to improve until you get there. So a lot of people look at me at almost 60 and go, wow, it's amazing. And really it was 60 years of incremental improvement.
Yeah, you're an overnight success, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I want to go over some basics for people listening because, we have board members who are going to be listening. We've got managers and we've got people living, residents in the community, and we'll have vendors who are listening. So some of the basics from a management perspective. What's a door fee? What's the difference between an on-site manager and a portfolio manager? And what's a burden rate?
Yeah, I just want to address one thing. My one observation is people, I think, especially in Florida, where almost every dwelling is either an apartment, which is controlled by the owner, or a condo or an HOA or a co-op. They're all now being built in these structures, these legal structures. And I just think people need to go in with a little more awareness, like maybe read the documents, understand. I mean, you know this better than anybody. But back to your specific question, door fees, Donna. Look, management companies are for-profit businesses, and they need a methodology, like any business, of how to charge their client. And historically, that has been done by charging a door fee or a per unit fee. So I'm making just a number to do the math easy, $10 per unit or per door. It's really per unit. There's lots of doors on a dwelling, but per month. So that would mean that the management fee in that case would be $120 a month for each unit. And then that's why management companies like to manage bigger communities, because 1,000 units, you'll make a lot more money than 100 units. But that's just a methodology. What we've migrated to, Don, and I think the industry is starting to go there, a couple companies have, and that is real transparency in fees. And that, look, we need to make this much money. We need to pay our bills. We need to make a reasonable profit. And by the way, there's no one in our industry that makes huge margin. There's no barriers to entry. So anyone can be a manager, which means you have new entrants at low cost coming in all the time. So I would say that there's probably not one management company in Florida that makes more than 10% on a dollar. And most businesses make more than that.
What about Texas? I know you manage properties throughout Florida and in Texas. Is there any significant difference in the door fees between those two markets?
Yeah, no, I mean, they're actually a little lower, if you can believe it, in Texas, because they have huge properties. And again, if I need to make X and the unit's got 1,000 units, then I can have a lower door fee, even though the total margin on that account is greater. And I do there are some nuances between Florida and Texas I'd love to get into later if we have time. So that was the door fee. And you were also asking me about burden rates, I think. Was that the second one?
The second one was the difference between on-site manager and portfolio.
Yeah,
this comes up all the time, James. And I've actually had some management companies tell me that they don't do portfolio work.
Yeah, and that's true of Castle. We made the decision in 2001, 20 years ago, that we really were all about service. And what happens with portfolio, Donna, is you have a manager, an employee of the management company, and they are managing communities that can't afford their own manager, so they may get assigned 10 communities. And so that portfolio manager is based in their property management company's office, and every day they go out and they visit a number of properties. And so the management eyes on each of those communities is very limited by definition, and no judgment here, because the community can't afford to have a full-time manager there. So you get what you pay for. But if you can imagine, if anything happens on all of those times that they're not there, there's no manager to deal with it. there'll be a protocol. But it's really tough. That manager's got to go 10, 11, 12, 13 properties. In fact, unfortunately for the management company, they're incented to put more properties on the manager because they make more money.
And what happens if the community is hit with a hurricane or another casualty event, and that manager is managing multiple properties at the same time? I wonder, how do they stretch themselves?
Well, every property should have a hurricane plan or an event plan. That we have contagion. We got to put that into that business interruption plan. And honestly, if you've got a portfolio manager, it's often the vendors and the board that has to jump in, and residents even. So it is a lot harder to respond when you have a portfolio manager. We made the decision that we didn't want our managers, because, by the way, if they have 10 accounts, they have to go to 10 board meetings a month. So it's hard. And so we said, you know what, let's be specialists. People like to go to specialists for health. Why don't we become a specialist? And so we made a strategic decision, and we can talk later about keys to success, but I think strategy is a big one. We're only going to do on-site communities, and we're only going to do kind of the upper half of quality of those communities. We used to rate it A, B, C, D. We now just call it Pride Line. Would we be proud to manage this community? And so a full-time on-site manager versus a portfolio manager is what it says it is. One manager assigned to one community, and they reside on site, and they're there usually 50 hours a week. So a completely different experience. And in fairness, communities that don't have that, it's because you have to be a fairly significant sized community or have fairly high maintenance fees.
Is it a luxury to be able to afford an on-site?
No, I think there are times it's luxury, but on bigger communities, it's a necessity. In fact, many of our communities have more than one manager. So there becomes, and high rises and HOAs are a little different because high rises have physical plant and different risk profiles and different preventive maintenance. So high rise buildings tend to have a full-time manager unless they're really small. And HOAs, it depends on size, scope, amenities, and whatnot. But all that to say, that manager has only got to go to one board meeting, maybe some committee meetings. So it's a completely different experience. But all are necessary. And if you take a continuum, Donna, no manager to full-time, any community can be anywhere in there. So we have some communities, a couple of them that have 20-hour managers, and we just split a manager between two. Or even if, and for the HOAs and condos and co-ops listening, I mean, think about that. Maybe you could get one manager for 4 properties. I know that's a little more than 10, but it's not a lot more. And then you're amortizing that cost over 4, but you would way rather have a quarter of a manager than a tenth. And I think a lot of communities don't consider being very deliberate in how much work that manager does, even though it may cost a little bit more. I think it's a good idea. It's
also about attention. You know me, I probably need 3 on-site managers.
Yes. Well, you know how much I respect I have for your husband, Michael.
No, and so the last basic question was, what's a burden rate? We hear about that a lot.
Yeah. So going back to fees, obviously we talked about the per door fee, and there are other fees that can be charged to communities. And I think this is really important when you are considering professional management and you have enter into a management agreement. And obviously there's very few communities that wouldn't send it to their attorney, and their attorneys in our industry are great, like yourself, Donna, and you're not going to let them sign a contract that isn't, well thought out. But the primary fees are the per door fees that you mentioned. And then we have to provide people. So if there's we have 50 employees, castle employees at some of our properties. If you're professionally managed, you want your management company to be the employer, because one of the advantages of professional management is you don't want to take on employment risk, workers' comp, EEOC compliance, et cetera. And so we have to charge the community for that, the cost of the labor, the cost of the people. And the cost of that is what it is. But what management companies tend to do is add some margin to that cost. And they do it in the form of a payroll burden. So I'm just using examples. There's different rates in different companies and different situations. But maybe if the cost of that employee is 20% of a salary, a management company would charge 30% and they would make 10%. Now, you would say, well, why do they do that? Well, they do that for two reasons. One, there's some real back office cost of being an employer, training, insurance, and all of the things that come with being an employer. And the other thing is it keeps the management fee down. And I think that's why our industry trended that way before I got into business. And so the most important thing, though, is this is just ways of determining how much the community is going to pay and how much the management company is going to earn. And so we've really migrated in the last few years to just having a very transparent, we need to make X.
And you already mentioned that the margins are relatively slim in your industry. I'm sure you're highly commoditized, the management industry in Florida, as is the legal industry.
We really are, and I know you are as well. And so let's just have a very frank discussion. I think a lot of businesses, not just management, are afraid to say, well, I'm making this much money, but look I'm not afraid at all. I'd way rather have a transparent relationship. And then, there may be a time where my client comes to me and goes, look this is what's happened. And, can we extend or adjust the contract? And there may be a time where we come back to a client and say, look, we completely misbid this. And shame on us. And we're going to finish the year, but we'd like you to consider next year. By the way, that doesn't happen very much because we know our business so well, but having that kind of transparent relationship, I think, is healthy and enjoyed more by both sides.
I imagine, James, that you see what we do in our industry, which is our competitors coming up with clever ideas or saying they're doing something different. In your industry, let's take door fees. Actually, let's take burden rate. Is there a trend maybe where people are saying, oh, we don't charge a burden rate, but that fee's added in somewhere else? Are you seeing that at all? And you mentioned trends with regard to on-site versus portfolio. Are you seeing a trend towards people maybe deciding, hey, portfolio isn't the way to go. Our needs just can't be managed by somebody we're sharing with, 8 other communities?
Yeah, I would say if you kind of trend lined it, Donna, between portfolio and on-site management, there wouldn't be a significant variation. Maybe a little bit more to on-site because developers are building bigger communities, but not because there's kind of a change in philosophy. But the two trends that I would think of there, one is we're seeing a significant trend from self-managed to professional managed. And we are seeing some creativity in the market, amongst our competitors, including different things in the burden or having no burden and having, the kind of the fixed price model. And then other trends are with technology that is coming into our world. So, but I think probably the most significant one we're seeing right now, and Donna, you and I have some common clients, and they're your clients that are self-managed, and they're hiring Castle or another management company to be professionally managed. So that's the biggest trend we're seeing. Is I think boards are starting to appreciate this takes expertise. This takes time.
Well, especially during the last year we've just had. I don't know how many of them navigated that alone. And that's a perfect segue because I wanted to ask you about self-managed. In Florida, we do have a significant percentage of communities that are self-managed. Now, I always thought self-managed is the board parcels out the duties amongst themselves. And by the way, James, I don't know if you know this. I sat on my own homeowners association board of directors for 2 years. You mentioned Michael, my better half. It was like the Berger seat on the HOA board here where we live. He had served for, I think, 6 or 8 years. He's also an attorney. They love tapping into that brain of his. And then he got off and he said, Donna, you've got to get on. So I got on the board, and what an eye-opening experience as a community association attorney sitting in that other seat, having to deal with unruly owners at the board meetings and the annual meeting, and then even dealing with the different personalities on the board. But we did not have a manager, a personal manager. All we had was a bookkeeper. And we literally had homework to do. I was the legal liaison, but one board member was in charge of landscaping, one was in charge of security. I don't know how boards do this. And I guess my first question to you is, what is the number one thing that self-managed boards get wrong, in your opinion?
I think what number one thing they get wrong is they should hire professional management. I mean, think about this, and look at there are lots of communities that are well run, that are self managed. But can you imagine? Look at every expense an association have. Should you cut your own lawn? Should you? I mean, why are you choosing management, which is the most influential vendor you have in terms of the success? Um, so I think the number one error is the false economy of doing it yourself. I think I hear from potential clients and clients that were self-managed is they do it for two primary reasons. One is, and I think they're both perceived. One is control. I don't want to give up control. And the second is cost. And so let's address the first one. I like to describe the relationship between the board and management very much like a corporate world. Our job is to make recommendations to the board. The board makes the decision. We don't. And then we go execute it. And there's usually a monthly cycle to that. We have technology designed around that. So when we come to our board meetings each month, we're not asking what should we do. We said, this is what we think we should do. Here's the priority. Here's who owns it. And here's the time frame. And we literally, every Friday at 5:00, our clients get a update of that. And it's green, red, or amber, GAR, GAR, green, amber, or red. And green, we're good. Amber, we're not there yet. Red, we didn't meet our agreed target. So there's no giving up of control when you hire professional management. You still are making all the decisions. So that's the first one. And then the second is cost. And it's rare. It is rare. And it's not just me. I'm speaking from my industry. It's rare. We cannot come in with the scale that we bring and not save our management fee. So the two primary reasons being control and cost, I think are being borne out as, in fact, not supported by the facts.
You're also a great buffer between the board and the members. I mean, we talked again at the outset that this is a living together relationship. I don't know how comfortable most board members are being the ones sending that violation notice or that collection late notice directly to their neighbor, as opposed to having, a management professional do it. I will also tell you, James, I've noticed that the ones who are self-managed also tend not to have attorneys on retainer. And here's the reality. At some point, you're going to need a management professional to help with a large renovation project, to help with the collection protocols. You're also going to need an attorney at some point with regard to collecting assessments, with regard to perhaps some litigation. It's nice to have that relationship in place before you need it. And, I think sometimes the self-managed communities find themselves behind an 8-ball because they don't think that they're ever going to need those relationships. When in reality, throughout the timeline of the lifespan of any community association, they're likely going to need management assistance and legal assistance.
Yeah. And I'm obviously biased in my comments, although I think they're supported in fact, but look, there's a lot of really well-run self-managed communities, and I tip my hat to the managers and the team that are doing that, and the boards are directing them. But think about this: boards change. The other thing that professional management does is provides the consistency as boards change. So that's a biggie. And then the other one is, even if you've got the best manager in the world at your community, we have 300 managers in our company, and you should see we have a platform where the managers can ask each other. I've got this going on. I've got this going on. Do you have a vendor? What did you do about this situation? We're bringing the collective brilliance of 300 managers to every property we manage versus one. Like, it's not even a fair fight. So I hope I have lots of self-managed communities listening to this, Donna, and ringing the phone off the hook. But you and I have talked about this a bit this past year with the webinar series. And think about that. A year ago, a contagion hit that we'd never experienced before, none of us in our lifetime. And no one knew what to do. And honestly, management companies didn't know what to do. But what we did was we created, and we talked about on the webinar, a framework, a decision-making framework. Okay, we need policy. The governor's given us emergency powers. But how do we apply that? And then as the year progressed, we were able to tighten up some of our recommendations. You were doing a great job coaching us on the legal side. But there's another example where we were taking data from all of our communities, putting it into a framework and sharing. Frankly, we were sharing it to the industry, not just to our clients.
Shared wisdom is perfect. But you raised a really important point about the function of the manager. I have found, James, that many times the manager is almost the historian in the community. And this becomes particularly important when a board comes to me as legal counsel and wants to enforce a violation. And I say, well, how long has the vehicle been there, or how long has the shed been there? And maybe a new board, or maybe some, there may be some people were there. They can't remember. They can't answer those questions and provide that information. Same thing with amendments where we're being challenged. Were those amendments properly voted on? I find that the manager is the historian that says, oh yes, okay, I've got that. This was voted on 5 years ago. That vehicle's been there for the last 4 years. Here's what we did. So yeah, that's a really important function. I do want to move on, and I want to circle back. You've mentioned technology a couple times. I will tell our listeners, I've been at Castle's headquarters. James is like Captain Kirk in front of a spaceship. He's got a command center like you can't believe. There's flashing green lights, red lights. You touched on that. We talk a lot about how technology can improve transparency, communications, and operations. What does that really mean? Like, walk us through that.
Yeah, well, because you mentioned our home office, I'll start there. I want to move out to the community and what a resident, what a board member, how it affects them. But, when companies are small like ours, I was employee number 1 and now we have 2,000. You kind of know where everything is. You don't need to have measurement and screens and charts because everything's in your head. But as you get bigger, you need to make sure that you're delivering the things you promise to your clients. And so what we've done is we've created 2 different sets of metrics. One is KPIs, which are used in many, many industries, key performance indices or indicators, and then SLAs, which are really service level agreements. And these are internally generated service levels. So if you call our office, we make a promise that we'll answer the call 90% of the time. And if you come into our office, there's a call center, and on the board, there's a big number in the top left-hand corner, and if it's 91, it's green. If it's 89, it's red. So we're measuring, and by the way, there's nothing in our contract. We've just decided that that's the service level we want to agree. And by the way, it's not always green. At the beginning of the month where late letters go out, or we've taken on some new communities and they're all trying to figure it out, our calls exceed our capacity. You can't build a church for Easter Sunday. So we have X number of resident service specialists. But my point here is simply what you referenced is we're now using technology to confirm, to measure that we're in fact doing what we say we do. And this is industry-wide. We obviously think we do it the best. But that's a real benefit in my mind, to using technology kind of on the management company side of the house. And then let's go out to the communities, and we're starting to get all these tools. So what do the tools do? Well, it helps us communicate. It helps us save time, and it helps us be better. Like you guys have Becker ballot. Like I'm shocked, as an example, that we're not seeing more e-voting, and I think we will. I think one of the things that the pandemic's done is it's pushed us that way. Every trend I think needs a catalyst, and that's it. But before we go there, so most of our other companies now have an app, or you can actually get a third-party app. So literally, you can sit on your iPad or your iPhone, and you can get all messages from your community. You can look if you owe money, or pay your maintenance from your phone, or book a ticket to an event if you're highly amenitized. And we even have where you can take a picture and send the whatever you want to management. If you can think of big HOAs with hundreds of acres, and we have maybe 5 employees or teammates on there, we depend on our residents to be our eyes. We can't be everywhere, and we love it when we have a resident take a picture and say, "Look at a branch that's fallen across the road or sidewalk," and now all of a sudden we know instantly. So. I'm just going to stop because I know you want to dig a little deeper, but in essence, what we're using is technology to be more efficient, more effective, more cost effective, better controls. And from the resident and the board, it's self-help, right? Used to be you had to call. Now you can do almost everything you need to do in a community association from the couch in front of the TV evening. And that includes the board. And we can talk a bit about some of the board tools, but I'll stop for a moment.
I've been surprised, James. You mentioned online voting, and we've, as you know, we've had so many boards hold virtual, not just board meetings, but virtual annual meetings and election throughout the last year. I've been surprised that Florida has so many 55 and over communities. Many of those communities have, in fact, embraced technology more so than I could have ever imagined. But I still think, is it a heavier lift to get those communities on board with just what you said, the mass communication systems, logging into the website, maybe agreeing to receive notices electronically, maybe the mass SMS text messaging for, look, I live in a community on a golf course, and recently I've been getting texts that there's this massive alligator floating through the canal in my backyard. And I did appreciate that, James, when I was in the cast, and was very curious that Michael said, let's have lunch outside every day. He disappeared. And then I'm getting texts that there's an alligator floating in the backyard. But you know what I'm saying? Is it a heavier lift for our 55 and over communities?
I love our 55 and better communities. I mean, think about this. You've worked hard all your life up north generally, and you come down to these palatial, amenitized clubhouses, gated, safe, maintenance-free, and look at all technologies change, over the history of mankind, and it's changing at such a rate right now that you're seeing quite a big delta between people who are older and people who are younger. Even look at us and our kids, Donna. But what I will tell you is, you open up a new 55 plus community, in Florida, and there's one going up every day. And what tends to happen is the people buying there between 55 and 65. And 20 years from now, they're going to be 75 to 85. And so we have 55 and better communities that are at the lower half of that, and some in the upper half. And it is true, the ones that have been around for a while are older residents who haven't been exposed or are as comfortable with that. And I'm turning 60 this year, so I'm about to put myself in this category. But the next one down, which I fit into, I mean, they've worked in technology. They've had it in their life all the time. So I do see actually a trend towards our adult communities, in fact, becoming much more technologically advanced. And what happens in the ones that are older is they eventually, turn over in age. And
we won't say how they turn over, but they turn over. I agree with you. We do have generational gaps now in these, what's called in legal terms, housing for older persons. We see that in the legal industry in terms of the priorities. So the 55 to 65, they may want to redo the documents. They want to fully fund reserves. They want to address violations. Our older folks, they may want to put off major renovation projects. They may not. Sometimes we do call them the green banana crowd sometimes, because they may think, I don't know that I want to fully fund reserves. But we are seeing a trend, and we'll talk about it a little later, with that younger group, where they are pushing a different agenda for these communities. I did want to dig into one thing, James. The management industry, more than anything else, you're a people business. You're all about your people. The people those are your representatives that you send out into these communities. What do you look for in people? Where do you find the people who are best suited to managing these communities?
Yeah, it's a great question, Donna, and we are. In fact, I'll often go out personally and present our firm to potential clients, and I say to them, this is a people business. If you look at the income statement of a management company, 90% of our expenses are payroll, and 10% is rent and other. So, I mean, it's obviously I present it, and it is our number one asset, but that doesn't take rocket science to figure that out. So, and I will tell you right now, we're having a terrible time with this American Recovery Act. The government is paying people more to stay home than it is to work. So our industry, the hospitality industry, the service industry is just desperate we're actually starting to pay application fees and stay fees, and it's unbelievable. But all that to say, look, a couple things I want to mention. Number one is I think you need a farm system just like a sports team, right? A sports team looks, if it's baseball, you need certain skills, and same with a business. So we actually went to Nova Southeastern University, NSU, Florida, and about 5-6 years ago, and we said, look, we need a property management company program in this state. And we asked them to put it together, and they said, yes, we will. Will you fund it, James? And Castle Group funded it. And it started as a minor, and I'm very, very proud to say that it's now a major. It's the only major in property management in Florida. And so we have a farm system. We offer every graduate a job. I'm reaching out to my competitors. This isn't a Castle issue. This is an industry issue. And I want us all to get in here and create even a stronger farm system. So that's number one. We need, and then they don't all of a sudden become your manager, but they come in and they're your assistant manager, and then they get groomed, and everyone keeps moving up. It's like the minor league system in sport. So that's one. Two, we have 1,000 people a day moving into Florida. That's 3 to a home. It's 333 homes. We need 333 new homes every day. Average size of a community, 333 homes. So we're literally needing a new licensed manager, and that could be an apartment manager. They're not all community associations, but every day we need a new one. So we need 365 new managers. There aren't 365 new managers.
Where do you find these people? And I know that you want to find the best people.
Yeah. So, the answer isn't from your competitor, because that's just taking from one and moving it to the next. So you need to the farm system, and then you need to go outside the state, and you need to go outside the industry. So I think, to your point, we market our open positions in Chicago and New York, especially in the winter. And then we also look to the hospitality industry, because our company's focus is Royal Service. We're the Castle Group. And this is a program we put together based on Ritz-Carlton's legendary service. And as part of that, we really drilled down into what are we looking for in a manager. And we have a very scientific process. It's called Predictive Index, where we have every applicant fill out, and it tells us who they are, what's their natural wiring. And there's no judgment here. If you're an accountant, which I am, so I can say this, you may not be as engaging. You may prefer the screen and the numbers and the ledgers, and that's good. We need that. But if I'm a client-facing front desk, property manager, I need someone that loves to serve people. And so, we have enough science to figure that out pretty quickly. And we find the hospitality industry hires and trains for that. And especially with what happened, unfortunately, the hospitality industry, we got a lot of talent in the last 12 months from that industry. But
one of my favorite managers I work with, and as counsel, we work quite closely. He happened to have been somebody who worked for years at the Ritz-Carlton. And I'm telling you, he's fantastic. Also happens to be one of yours. So, but he is fantastic. And I think it's a perfect fit because it's hospitality. Now, some of our condo and HOA residents take that a little too much to heart, thinking that, sometimes I feel as if they do think that they're at a hotel or a resort when it really is a multifamily condominium building. And I don't know that some of the requests that come through the managers are really something the manager should be contending with. But that's for another conversation.
Yeah, well, I think that you mentioned Ritz-Carlton, and they're the world kind of leader in this space. And I know my competitors do this too. We literally will go on LinkedIn and search by Ritz-Carlton because we know what kind of training they got. Great source of talent, and that is 100% the most important thing that we have in our industry.
How do you feel about licensure? So in Florida, we do have the management industry does require licensing. The management companies must be licensed. The individual CAMs must be licensed. Now, off and on over the years, there's been some discussion with regard to deregulating the CAM industry. I know in other states, they don't require any sort of licensure. In Florida, it's I believe, 19 hours of a course, and then you take a test. How do you feel about that? If they were to do away and deregulate managers, the management industry altogether, is that something you'd support or you'd have some concerns about?
Well, first of all, it would make it easier for me to hire, because I can't just hire anyone on the street. I have to hire a licensed manager, and that's true in Florida. There are some interesting nuances between Texas and Florida, and there's a lot of similarities, by the way. I mean, these are two of the greatest states in the country. But as an example, Texas doesn't require licensure. So I'm seeing it both sides of this, and I would fall on supporting licensure. I think we're a profession. We need education. We need standards. We need enforcement. We need compliance. And it's not just the 19 hours. We have an obligation for continuing education. So our communities deserve the professionalism that licensure brings. It doesn't mean you can't have, good people without license or bad people with license, but I think it brings a professionalism to our industry that is a positive net. And by the way, I believe, you may know more than me, Don, but I believe there are more states without licensure than with.
There are. And that's why there's the pressure in Florida. But I agree completely with you. Listen, let's be honest. Florida has its share of scammy actors down here. And without licensure at all, really anybody with a business card and a cell phone could become say they're a manager and start managing a 7-figure budget tomorrow. And it becomes very difficult. And I will tell you that some of our boards are very vulnerable to bad actors in this space. Does licensure cure everything? No, but at least it sets some sort of a standard. And we do have some framework where we can file a complaint if we've got a bad actor. So I agree with you there. So I want to say, you and Kathy, you made a significant lifestyle move, as many people will in Florida and Texas and throughout the country, which is you went from the single family home in which you raised your family and you moved into a multifamily building. It's a different lifestyle. How did that sort of shape your perspective? And what do people, you touched on this at the beginning, what do people need to know before they buy in a shared ownership community? Let's say they've always lived in a single family home. I grew up in a single family home in Chicago, no association. Although we did have a vacation condo unit in Hallandale. I won't name the community. And I remember I'm one of 4 kids, and my dad used to sit us all down before we get on the plane to come to Florida from Chicago and say, don't violate any of the rules. Don't embarrass me in front of the board. Of course, we always violated the rules, and he was always possibly subject to fining. But what was that like for you and Kathy? Was it a significant shift in terms of, going from a single family home where you didn't have people on either side of you? Actually, you don't, because I know where you live. You're in the penthouse.
Yeah, no, we're very fortunate. But I think, Donna, we moved from a really nice HOA gated community to a condo. So, we were living in a community association in both instances. And our move was more done about lifestyle. Like, we park our car on Friday night and it doesn't come out. And if you've been downtown Fort Lauderdale lately, it's restaurants and services and museums and the Performing Arts Center and the river and Las Olas. It's unbelievable. So we are thrilled with the move. As it relates to living in a condo versus an HOA, that's significant. An HOA, and people obviously know, most people listening know this, but you need to know, and that is, you can't paint your house any color you want, and you got to keep the grass cut, and you got to clean the roof, and you can't change the architecture without getting permission, which is very frustrating, especially these high-end communities. These are really successful people going, what? This management company is, because we're the ones enforcing it. What do you mean? And you wouldn't believe how many instances where the homeowner who's used to getting their own way is not happy with having to comply. So that's the HOA. You get to a condo and you're living, it's like a dorm. It's like communal living. I mean, you're going up with all your neighbors up and down that elevator, and you have to all agree or not on what the improvements to the lobby are going to look like and what programming is going to be put on in the fitness center. And it may not be what you want. So you have to have a level of tolerance, a level of patience to live in a high-rise condo. We've had some neighbors move in and move out and go, this is not for us. So I just say,
did you get on the board?
Never. Yeah. And of course they know who I am, and it's managed by one of my competitors, and so they want me to get on the board. I'm like, no. I don't want to be attacked going up and down the elevator as the owner of the management company. But no, look at it. It's got its. We also go down to the most incredible pool deck. We speak about Ritz Carlton. I think we have a nicer pool deck than Ritz Carlton does, and so. And when the hurricane comes, you just lock your doors. And when you want to go, we have a home in Canada. We just turn the key, and so you call down for services. It's a great lifestyle. I'm a big proponent.
You need to work on Michael. He's attached to this house. I'm in the same situation. I'm out in the suburbs. I'm in a beautiful home in a homeowners association. Love it. But I also listen. I'm a city girl. Grew up in Chicago. That lifestyle, that urban lifestyle, is very appealing to me. So we're running out of time, but I want to touch on something. I don't know many people who do know you. I don't know if they know this, that you're in the process of writing a book. I believe it's called Life Shaping. And now I've heard from many authors that they don't write books for the money. They do it for other reasons. So what's Life Shaping about, and why did you feel the need to start writing it?
Well, first of all, life shaping, how do you live your life consciously? Most people live their life like a leaf on a stream, and they go where the stream goes. And I asked myself the question, how did this guy from Bell's Corners, Ontario, guy and girl, arrive where we are? And I literally have the most incredible life I could dream of. How did that happen? And if I could codify that, could I share and help other people? So that's what the book's about. And if you can imagine, life shaping, taking a life and consciously shaping it. And most of us don't. Most of us, you go here and you go there, and then the road turns and you turn, and instead of being deliberate. Like we wanted the downtown's lifestyle, so we made that happen. We moved from Canada to Florida. So basically, what happens with people is we're born with some pre-wiring, right? Genetics, and then there's learned. And even our learned, like think about it. Do you choose your parents? Do you choose where you grew up? Do you choose your teacher? Do you choose the first sport? Do you choose the friends on either side of you on the street? So by the time you're 16, most human beings' brains are hardwired, and they had very little input, deliberate input. And so this book is about how you can rewire to deliberately shape a life that you want. And really, it's all about a success cycle. So come up with a plan, implement the plan, and then evaluate the plan and make adjustments. And what most people do, even if they come up with a plan, which a lot of people don't, we all implement it because we live our life, but we don't all evaluate and adjust. And those last two steps are what made my life amazing.
It sounds fantastic. When do we anticipate publication of this?
Well, we probably shouldn't even talk about it, because I probably started this book 7 or 8 years ago, and it was causing me great stress because I wasn't getting it done. And so I finally said, you know what? There's times of life. I read this one book that said, well, you should live your life backwards. When do you expect to live to? And I put the number 90. Well, you can't, play hockey from 80 to 90. So you need to slot the things you want to do in the right time periods. Well, I can write a book when I can't play hockey or I can't travel. So I've actually put that off. I think, I'm learning to fly right now, and that's taking a lot of my time. So I've actually put a hold on the book. I mean, I have the concept. I can tell you exactly what the steps are, but
so when you're 80, you pick it up when you're 80.
Or 70 or 80. Yeah.
That makes sense. So one last question. And thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. What is most important to you now?
Yeah, well, obviously, health is, you can't experience anything that we talked about for the last 45 minutes without your health. So that's the most important thing. Family, obviously, to me and my relationship with my wife is the most important thing. My business, we've got it in a great place. So I really turned a lot of my attention to giving back. As you probably know, I'm the chair of the Community Foundation. Kathy and I have recently set up an endowed fund to give back to Broward for the rest, or even beyond our lives. And so I'm really focused a lot on giving back. And that doesn't just mean like charitable giving and our roles in the community. Kathy's been she's the immediate past chair of the Children's Services Council. But it like, how can I give back to the team here? We just started a DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion committee here because, not everyone is getting lifted up at the same rate. I was on a committee in the last couple of years to help the homeless. So, without going into all the details, I feel so fortunate. Kathy and I feel so fortunate. We have a beautiful life, beautiful friends like you guys. And it's time to see what we can do about making a difference in people who need it and get the lift off that somehow I got when I was young. So that's going to be our focus.
You've already built an amazing legacy. You've got a beautiful family. You've got an incredible company. You've given back so much to the community. I'm blessed to know you and Kathy. And thanks again for joining us. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review so even more people can take it to the board. Lastly, please visit takeittotheboard.com for more information.